Hi everyone, this is Christophe with linuxacademy.com, and today we're going to be talking in Cloud Cadet episode number 6 with instructor and founder Anthony James. We're going to be talking about the Amazon Web Services Certified Solutions Architect Professional Level course, which we just completed. And so he's going to tell us about how to prepare for that certification and what steps we should be taking to prepare for that. So Anthony, can you introduce yourself and introduce what you're going to be talking about a little bit?
Absolutely. As you said it, I'm one of the AWS instructors at Linux Academy. I happen to do the CSA Associate and CSA Professional level courses. And today we're going to be primarily focusing on studying and preparation best practices. So believe it or not, even when you're taking an exam, I'm going to teach you a few concepts and a few exam taking ideas or best practices that you can take with you that might increase your chance of success. And really the best part about this is it doesn't apply to just the AWS certifications. This applies to any test-based certification, and more specifically, any question and answer, or excuse me, any multiple choice certification.
Well, and I do want to say this, you have, what, 7 certifications so far or something like that?
I do. I have 7 certifications, yes.
Yeah, so I want to ask you some questions about how to prepare for the certifications, because obviously you're doing something right. And so hopefully all of us can learn about how do you study for those certifications. Are there any tips that you can share with us and things like that? So can you tell us just a little bit more about this course and what it entails?
Absolutely. So the AWS Certified Solutions Architect course, professional level, is the successor to AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate level. So we know the associate level is kind of the first place you want to start. And if you're heading to Linux Academy and you've never taken any type of AWS content and you don't know any AWS, again, the Certified Solutions Architect level at Linux Academy is designed to teach you everything you need to know to become qualified. And really one of my biggest tips when it comes to preparing for these certifications is to not prepare for the exam. I don't want you to try to figure out how to pass the exam. I don't want you to focus on exam dumps or try to take as many questions as possible, because what you're doing is you're learning how to answer questions. What you want to do in this type of environment, because I believe that you're here trying to get this certification. Usually when you want to get a certification, it's to increase your salary or it's to get a job. So I truly believe that you want to be qualified, and that's what we want to do, is we want to train you to be qualified. And once you're qualified, taking an exam is super, super easy. And that's why actually we have 98% plus reported pass rates on our Linux Academy AWS content on the actual courses that I do work on.
Well, and the thing with linuxacademy.com, if you're not a member or even if you are a member, is we offer a variety of different things. So I'm looking at your course right now, and you have videos, you have hands-on videos, you also have live labs and exercises and quizzes and things like that. Can you explain a little bit more about what the difference between all those different things are?
Absolutely. At the Linux Academy, our philosophy has always been to take in-person training and merge it with online self-paced training. So when you're taking a course, you're watching videos, you're learning concepts, you're watching the instructor perform inside of a Linux terminal or the console or command line tools. Then what you're doing is you're taking self-paced labs. These labs help reiterate and reinforce the concepts that you've just learned. So these self-paced labs deploy out AWS environments with specific scenario situations. And then you go through these labs, and our labs have video instruction as well as downloadable lab guides. So you can either read it and go step by step, or you can listen to the instruction, stop, and then do the lab yourself. So this way you're listening and then doing, rather than just reading what you're told to do on an actual lab guide. And what I believe this does is I believe this helps reinforce and helps you really learn the concepts that you need to know in order to be a qualified solutions architect. And when you're qualified solutions architect, passing exams is easy. And one of the other things that we have in there is what our new practice exam system is at the Linux Academy. And so what this does is it not only helps you prepare for the certifications for the exams, but part of preparing for an exam is knowing the content. The other part is knowing how to actually take the exam. So what does that mean? Well, you're given a specific amount of time inside of an exam environment, and you have to go in and you have to know when to move on and when to come back, and you need to know about how much time you need to spend on each question. So our practice exams mimic this type of environment and really kind of allow you to get a feel for it, because a lot of times Failing an exam isn't because you don't know and you're not qualified. It's because it might be your first exam. And when you go to your first exam, you're nervous. And in fact, when you go to your 7th exam, you're nervous. It's okay to fail. Everybody fails. So don't get discouraged if you ever fail an exam. Just learn. It's an opportunity to learn what you don't know and learn better. But what I'm trying to say is what this does, it helps you be psychologically prepared. It reduces the fear. It helps lower your heart rate. When you have a high heart rate, when you're nervous, sometimes you're reading what's on the screen and you don't realize that you just read an entire paragraph and you don't realize 5 minutes just left. All of these are real things that happen to people when taking exams. And that's what we're trying to help you prepare for, not only by doing or helping you prepare to be an AWS Certified Solutions Architect, Associate, or Professional level, but also helping you prepare to take these types of exams in a real environment.
So let's say that I'm a new student to Linux Academy, but I already have certifications, and so I want to take your professional level course. How would you recommend I start with that? Would you just recommend that I start with the videos, go from one video to the next, and then go to the live labs? Or is there a specific order to that? Or is it just whatever you like better or whatever works better for you?
That's a great question. What we try to do is we try to reduce the amount of effort and time you need to put into thinking about that. So part of the problem is when you're preparing for a certification is knowing what to look for, knowing what to prepare for, knowing how to do it and what order to do it. And so that's what we've done as part of this course is we've optimized that. So when you log into Linux Academy and you go to the Certified Solutions Architect Associate or Professional level or Developer Associate or SysOps Associate or any other certification, you start at the top and you go to the next one. And you go to the next item and you complete them as you do it. And if you do it in order, you're going to learn the concepts very easily. You're going to practice, and learning this and preparing to be qualified becomes very easy, and it can be done very quickly as well.
What about the time frame? Would you say that students should set a deadline? For example, they should come to this course and say, I'm going to go ahead and schedule the exam for a specific date, and now I have to cram that in between now and then? Or should you study first and then see how fast it's going and then set a date for that exam? How would you say they should do that?
That's a great question. You know, what we have at the Linux Academy is a lot of data. And we have a lot of data from the small amount of students who haven't been successful and a lot of data from the amount of students who have been successful. So if you do take a look at our blog and our weekly roundups, we usually have 10 plus reported passes on AWS certifications each week alone inside the Linux Academy community. So to kind of answer the question on that, what we've done is we've looked at what makes somebody successful and not successful. And what we see in the not successful ones, and this is something we iterate in the course over and over, and this is what I want to reiterate to you here now, because you may not be using Linux Academy to prepare for the certification, and that's okay. We still want to help you be successful. So probably the worst thing that you could absolutely do is register the exam before even preparing for your certifications. I understand why you want to do it, because personally, you're giving yourself this deadline and you're saying, I don't have a choice. I'm taking the exam in 2 weeks. I got to prepare. The problem with that is you may not know what it really takes to prepare, especially on a professional level course. You have to have a lot of IT background. And if you don't have somebody giving you the information you need and helping you get up to speed on that IT background, understanding basic security concepts, understanding basic networking concepts, then what's going to happen is you're either going to get discouraged and give up, or you're going to go into the exam not fully qualified, and that's going to actually cause you to fail. However, if you are a Linux Academy student, what we do know is that having these deadlines and knowing what to study and when to study helps keep you on track. And that kind of goes back to the goal that we have of taking in-person training and merge it with self-paced online training. So what we've done for our courses is we've developed something called a learning plan. And it's very simple. You put in your availability to study each week. So let's say that you have Monday at 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. to study, but you have Wednesday from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. to study. And that's it for the week. And you want to know when you should expect to be prepared for the exam. And you also want to know what you need to study on those days as part of the course syllabus. So you enter in that availability. You can even set up reminders to remind you to log in and study on those days. And what it does is it calculates how long it will take for you to prepare for the exam. We try to use our algorithms with the data we know for individual courses to add in additional time on what you should also use on studying. And then it will also tell you exactly what you need to take on that individual day. So this Wednesday, tomorrow, for example, today's Tuesday, I would log in and I would know exactly what I have to study. And if I get behind, I know exactly what I have to do to catch up. And so I know exactly what needs to be done when to study, and that keeps me on track. And I can do that rather than registering for an exam, which puts a lot of pressure, a lot of fear, a lot of stress. And when you're under stress and you're under pressure, studying and trying to learn advanced concepts is really, really hard, right? So that goes into taking an exam. When you go in and you're stressed and your heart rate is rushing and your palms are sweaty, that makes it difficult to really focus on what you need to be focused on in the exam.
What about if you do follow that set schedule and you are on track and you finish a few days before your exam, or maybe a week before the exam, and you've already gone through all the content and all the hands-on labs? Would you have any recommendations of what students should do next? Should they go back through the content one more time? Should they do more hands-on, or just freely work around the Amazon console? What would you recommend for that?
You know, that's a great question. So listening to an instructor, taking the labs, and taking the practice exams is 80% of what you need to do. Now, think of it as kind of maybe when you're in school. You go to school and you listen to the instructor. You might read the book, but you have exercises. Now, we have exercises, we have self-paced labs, but doing it one time doesn't really reiterate the concepts. You can go in and follow and do in lab, especially if you're just reading a lab guide and you're following, you're just doing what you're told. Is it really clicking? Are you really thinking about it in different ways that this could apply to your specific environment, or different ways it can apply differently? So I always encourage, even though we have probably the most in-depth AWS certification training content out there. Our AWS professional levels, 36, 37 hours. Our associate levels, the same amount, because we also cover introduction to AWS in the associate level. We try to cover it all so that when you do go through the videos, it's enough. But we always, always, always say, you got to practice. You have to go through it. You need to practice, and do not memorize questions. Memorizing questions is going to teach you how to pass the questions. But guess what? The questions are not going to be the same on the exam, right? Hopefully everybody's abiding by the NDA agreements. They're not going to be the same on the exam. AWS updates questions, right? They're going to have different ones in there. So just doing exam dumps is not going to teach you to be qualified on that. And so that's how we approach it. And so if you have a few extra days on your studying, absolutely go through the self-paced labs again. When you take a practice exam, maybe go back and look at your results and then figure out where you were weak. So maybe you were weak on auto scaling or fault tolerance or auto healing concepts, or maybe VPC networking. Spend some more time doing hands-on and going through those videos and going through those labs to make sure that's where you are.
Mm-hmm. And going back to what you were saying about memorizing the answers, it can be really tempting when you go through the exam the first time and you get a certain score and you saw certain questions were wrong. You want to copy and paste those, and then you want to go through it right after that, maybe an hour or less right after you took the quiz or exam already, and you just want to copy and paste those answers to have a better score. But that's not the way that you learn it. How would you recommend that they approach that situation otherwise?
In terms of when you get something wrong, reading the solution, for example, is that the question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, if you get something wrong, what you should do is, what did you get wrong, right? So when you look at practice exams, what they're doing is they're testing specific concepts, right? So for example, let's say you do get something wrong with advanced elastic load balancer policies, right? And you just don't understand. You can read the explanation. I don't encourage anybody to focus on any answers until they've actually completed all 3 of our practice exam attempts that we ask you to do. And the reason I say that is because if you read the answers, next time you take your practice exam and you get that question, well, you're going to get it right because you got the answer. Now, granted, we have hundreds of questions and it pulls in from a pool each time, because like I said, it mimics, and we'll talk about this shortly. But what you need to do is you need to go back to that section. And you need to spend the extra time to go through the section, all of the section, because that means that's where you're weak, right? You need to take that opportunity to say, I didn't know this. I need to go back and go through that entire section again, go through those labs again. And even if you think it's a waste of time because maybe you know 80% of the section, it never hurts to reiterate concepts. What you're doing is you want to make sure you're qualified for job interviews, for job situations, for your production environments on AWS, and for passing the exam.
So earlier you mentioned how with certain questions, well, sometimes you can look at some of those questions and they can be really tricky. So you'll read through and it's a paragraph long question, and you might read through it because you're nervous and you think that you know the answer because of certain keywords that you picked up. You select that answer and it turns out it's the wrong answer because of the way that certain words are laid out. It completely changes the meaning of those questions. How can you prepare for that, and how can you make sure that you really pay attention to what the question actually is instead of being really nervous and powering through it? Is it really just being more prepared?
That's a great question. Nothing can prepare you. No content can prepare you. I'll say nothing. I'm going to try to prepare you here, but no content on AWS can prepare you to take an exam. Taking an exam is a skill, right? So that means understanding how to read the question, understanding how to read the answers, understanding how to spend your time. AWS really wants to make sure that you're qualified. And so does the Linux Academy. We don't encourage shortcuts. We don't encourage exam dumps. We encourage you to be qualified. So, part of that is also knowing how to take an exam and preparing to take the exam. And that increases your chances of success. And so I actually have a demo that I'm going to do with the little whiteboard that we can talk about some kind of exam taking best practices. And then I can also show you a little bit about how the practice exam system works that helps you work through it as well.
Okay, so is it ready to go? Are you ready to go, Anthony, with the slide and demonstration?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so what I want to show you here is I'm going to also pull up a whiteboard here in a second. But what I want to do is I want to take the opportunity to give you some test taking best practices, right? So again, knowing how to take the test, being prepared is your goal. Not knowing how to answer a certain set of questions, that's not your goal. Being qualified to do it and being qualified to take the test, that's our goal here. So let's approach this from, how do I prepare to take a test? Nobody's taught me that before. How do you prepare to take a test? Well, when you're taking a test, this is what I would encourage you to do. And this is probably something you should really memorize. And actually what I'm going to show you to is something you should also memorize. It's actually one of those things you want to memorize when preparing for an exam. And then also practicing this in a practice exam system. So for example, when you're taking a test, I want you to start from the beginning. It seems like common sense, but there's been reports of people who go through and start in the middle, or they start in the end. What I want you to do is start at the beginning. Never complicate this. Start with question 1 and go from there. Now, the second thing I want you to do is answer each question one by one. So let's say that you just happen to be on question 1 and you're reading this. Your palms are sweaty, your heart is racing, you're ready for the exam, you don't want to fail, and you read it and your response is, oh my gosh, I have no idea what this is asking me. Well, if you have no idea, what you should do is you should mark it for review later. Do not select an answer yet, okay? Even if you think, hey, I'm going to guess an answer, I don't want you to select an answer yet. Then I want you to move on, and here's why. When you're taking an exam, and when you're taking any exam, this is not just for AWS, if you're taking a Linux exam, if you're taking a Puppet exam, you're being tested over a certain set of knowledge. And when you're qualified, that means you're able to answer questions and perform job functions and manage environments within that realm of qualification. But guess what that also means? That also means that the questions on the exam are going to be within that realm of competency as well. So believe it or not, when you're reading an answer or a question on another set of questions down the test, that might trigger something in your head. In other words, other questions at times can help answer your previous question that you didn't know, either by triggering it or even giving you a clue about what it could be. And this doesn't mean just because you didn't know the first question, doesn't mean that you're not qualified. It might just mean that you're really nervous and you do need something to trigger your head. It's really weird. When you go into an exam sometimes, it's almost like you forgot everything that you just spent the past month or 2 months working on. It's really crazy. So the third thing I want you to do when you're working on a specific question is I want you to read all the potential answers. Let's say you read A and you're like, that A is it. I know A is it, done. I'm going to save time and I'm going to move on to the next question. That's the worst thing that you can do. And the reason that's the worst thing that you could do is because A might be right or B might be really right. It might be the right way to do it based off what the question is asking. So what we know, especially with Linux and AWS, is that things can be configured differently. A configuration might be based off of cost. It might be based off of high availability. Sometimes when you want to go with high availability and durability, for example, multi-region architectures, your opportunity cost, or what you're giving up there, is a cost savings. So if you read the question, it might be right, but it might not be right for what the question is asking. So don't just read the first question, read all the questions, okay? Even if you think it's obviously correct, always read all of the questions. So the fourth thing I want you to do is take turns reading the potential answers. And I think I said on number 3, read the questions. I want you to read all the potential answers is what I'm saying there on an individual question. Don't just skip one. So the fourth thing I want you to do is take turn reading the potential answers for a question from A to whatever, from top to bottom, and then from bottom to top. And why is that? Well, that's just going to really kind of increase our chances of not messing something up. It's going to help enforce our practice of reading all of our questions. And it's also going to allow us to look at a question differently. How many different ways can you look at a question? This is one of those things that helps keep us on our toes. It helps keep us thinking outside of the box rather than just reading a question and taking the first correct answer. The fifth thing I want you to do is I want you to understand what the question is asking. When you're getting in the professional level exams, when you're getting in any type of exam, really, what you have to understand is how to architect a solution based off of requirements. Especially with AWS, there's 70 or however many different services. I could give you 5 different ways to architect a basic web application, right? Whether you're using Elastic Beanstalk or OpsWorks, or you're doing your own auto scaling and configuring it with command line interface, or you're using multi-region load balancing with Route 53. You know, there's 1,000 different ways to configure a basic web application. What you need to do is you need to see what the question is asking. Is it asking me to configure the web application based off of high availability? There's no downtime allowed. We need to have high availability and high durability. It needs to be multi-region. Well, that's the opportunity cost. Our cost is going to be higher. Is it saying, all right, I don't care as much for high availability. This is an internal application, but not a production application. But we are cost sensitive. So do we want to reduce our cost, right? So understand what the question is asking. Approach it from that perspective. Cost savings architecture is not always the same as a full, highly available architecture. So the next thing let's go ahead and do is I'm going to pull up, I have a whiteboard application. I'm going to pull it up here on my screen for everybody to see. Give me 1 second.
And while you do that, I will comment that whenever sometimes I take tests, and like you were saying in your slide there, that you might read the first answer and you think, oh, this is obviously the right answer. But then you read the next one and the next one and the next one, and there might be another answer that also seems to be right. And so you start getting confused, you start second guessing yourself, and you're not sure which one to take. In that situation, oftentimes I will just mark it as a review later. And as I'm going through the test, just like you were saying, when I get back to that question, sometimes it just comes to me. I just think, oh, well, yeah, this, I don't know why I was confused by this one. It's obviously this answer. And then it ends up being right. So, you know, sometimes even if you think you know the answer, if you're just slightly confused and you're not entirely sure, you can always go back to it later and not worry about it right then.
Absolutely. And, you know, I want to put in this disclaimer again, you know, this specific podcast, what we're doing here and what you're asking me, Christophe, you know, if you're looking to figure out what's on the test, and so you can study just that, you know, we're not going to do that. And the reason we're not going to do that is because we all agree to NDA. I don't want to basically devalue a certification. We have a lot of students and there's a lot of people out there who are working hard to be qualified. You know, back in the early 2000s, they had something called paper MCSEs. And the funny thing was, it was these students who had a certification, they could pass the exam, but quite literally, they couldn't even install Windows Server at the time, right? So that's not what we're going for here. We're not trying to devalue the certification for anybody. So what I want to, again, emphasize here, not exam dumps. Focus on being qualified. That's how we create our content at Linux Academy, but we also do it in such a way to help you prepare for exam. So what I'm going to show you is how to test taking best practices. Again, applied to any exam you take. You could be a student in college and you want to take this and take it for your test taking best practices for your biology test. That's multiple choice. You can absolutely do that. So here I am, I'm inside of my exam, okay? Here I have is my set of questions. Again, my set of questions, which we're not gonna cover what's on there, but we're gonna kind of cover how we should look at a question, right? And I have my potential answer A, B, C, D. However many there are. Maybe it's a true or false, maybe there's A through F. Doesn't matter, okay? So we have our question. My test taking best practice here tells me what I wanna do is I'm either gonna start at D and read up D, C, B, A, or I'm going to start at A and read down A, B, C, D. Now, if I read A and I feel like A is the correct answer based off the question, I looked at the question, absolutely, that's how I would architect it if I was inside this environment. I'm going to go ahead and circle A because I feel like it's a good question. And what I mean by circle is use your scratch paper. Write down A, B, C, D. Basically, this is my scratch paper. Think of this as my scratch paper. And I'm on a specific question. I type down A, B, C, D. And I'm going to go ahead and circle A. Then I'm going to go back to my screen, and I'm going to read question B. And B, I mean, B seems right. B also seems right. It's kind of weird because A seems right, but B also seems right. So I'm going to go ahead and circle B. Something for me to think about as I'm going down and reading. Now, I read C, and C's talking about OpenStack. Okay, clearly C is not going to be it, right? And again, I'm using arbitrary examples as not to indicate of anything that's on the exam. Take it for what it's worth, Christophe. But C is clearly not it. And I read D. D is clearly not it. So I'm going to mark out C and D. Well, I now have given myself probably about a 50% chance of getting this question right because I know A and B, one of those has to be right. And I've given myself a 50% chance, so I've effectively already increased my odds of passing the exam. Okay, now I'm reading question A, and it seems awfully similar to question B. So what I want to do is I want to compare the two. What is different between question A and question B? As soon as you figure out what is different about question A and question B, I keep saying question.
Yeah, I was going to say answer A and this should be.
Hopefully that doesn't mess anybody up. As soon as you figure out what's different between answer A and answer B, go back and see which one applies to your question because they will be different. You're never going to have two answers, potential answers that are exactly the same. And figure out which one applies to what the question is asking. And so B might just have a little word that changes something. And it changes it to something that makes it obvious that it's not question B, and so I have question A. Now, these concepts apply to the same. So let's say that we have A, B, C, D. Again, this is my scratch sheet. And what I know here is that I have no idea how to answer this question. Okay, we don't want to teach you how to pass an exam based off questions. We want you to be qualified. But you may just have no idea how to answer a question. And what I want to do is I want to give you test-taking best practices that are going to increase your odds of passing the question, regardless of if you know if it's correct or incorrect. Now, again, if you're not qualified, you won't pass the exam anyway. This only works for one or two questions. You're never going to pass an exam based off of this method. But it's basically similar to what we showed you. Read the question. Question A, all right, well, again, I'm not doing anything with OpenStack inside of AWS. They're not even related services. So I'm going to go ahead and cross out A. B, I mean, that sounds good. I really don't know. So that's a potential answer. C, nope, that's not it. D, that seems pretty crazy too. B's my gut. So I want you to go through and eliminate it one by one. And again, it's very important, especially when you think two questions might be the correct answer. And so you want to nix out and close what you're looking at. Instead of going back and reading the wrong potential answer over and over and over again, you're going to tell yourself, I'm only going to look at answer A and answer B and compare it. Because if you keep having to read all four answers over and over again, you're wasting time and you're confusing yourself during the process.
I think we've covered a lot of really useful tips here. This is going to help me a lot personally, so I know it's going to help a lot of other people as well. Are there any other tips you can think of, Anthony?
I do. I actually have a demo here if you want to see it. This is the
Awesome.
AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate Level course from Linux Academy. Again, we do have a professional level course. That's kind of what we were talking about here today. But I thought I would go ahead and open up this one and browse down to the bottom. And what we'll see here is we'll see our practice exam. Now, again, as a disclaimer, our practice exam are not the same questions on an exam. That's not how this works, right? We respect AWS. We don't want to devalue the certification for anybody else who becomes qualified. What our practice exam does, it tests you over the competencies inside of the course, the stuff that the instructor, or in this case, the stuff that I have gone through and taught you. Now, when we do this, as you can see, we've been practicing here. I've failed at this many times, but this is part of our exam system. So we've actually built this based off of what we know about people being successful and unsuccessful when taking the exam. So we have a pool of questions here. But when you go into the practice exam mode, it's going to allow you an hour and 20 minutes with 60 questions. It's going to simulate the exam. And then it's going to pull from our pool of questions 60 of them, which is why we require you to pass the exam 3 times before we allow you to complete the course. We also don't show you the answers in practice exam mode until you've passed it 3 times. Because again, if you're focusing on answers and questions for your preparation, you're reducing your odds of being successful. It could very well be devaluing the certification for other students, and you may not be qualified. Now, you might be an engineer inside of AWS every single day, and you might say, I just don't need this course and I want the practice exam. If that's the case, you don't need the answers anyway. You should be able to take the practice exam, pass it every single time, and get the potential answers. So if you're already qualified that and you want to test your skills, this is a great way of doing it. And so what this is going to do is it's going to load those 60 questions. It's going to set me an hour and 20 minutes. And then I'm going to go in and take the exam. So it's mimicking my exam environment. This is my time remaining. I have a countdown. It's always a countdown staring at you in exams, right? That doesn't help the situation. Let's just say that. Again, we can go with best practices of selecting Ask Me Later, and that will move it to the end of this specific exam set. You're still going to have to address it. So this is going to help you prepare to take an actual exam. Now, the other option that we have here is practice mode. Practice mode allows you to get crazy if you want to get crazy on exam testing. It also shows you our practice exam answers at the end of the quiz. So we're going to say, all right, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes and I want to answer, I don't know, I want to answer 22 questions in 10 minutes. I really want to test my skill and see how I do under extreme amounts of pressure. I can go ahead and start that practice exam, and that's going to be my setup there. It's going to pull in 22 questions from our random pool of questions, and it's going to give me 10 minutes to answer those, and it's going to give me a timer that stresses me out the entire time I'm taking the exam. And so when it comes to taking practice exams and preparing, you guys kind of understand my philosophy. When you want to go and prepare for this exam, regardless of what resource you use, don't focus on questions. I couldn't be more clear on that. Focus on practicing, using labs, doing hands-on, deploying out these environments, being in the situation that you're supposed to be qualified for.
But as you can see from the screen here, this is the practice exam, the quiz. We also have hands-on training. We have server labs, and we have videos as well, and a lot more to offer, as well as a community where if you have questions or if you're stuck or if you don't understand an answer or a question, you can go to the community and you can say, hey, I'm really stuck here. Can I get some help? And you'll get both instructors and students who can help you answer those questions and help you succeed.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because the one other thing I wanted to say that I forgot to mention as part of the course is that when we do want to take in-person training and merge it with online self-paced training, one thing that in-person training gives you access to is an instructor. And so I didn't know if anybody knows this, but as part of your membership at the Linux Academy at no additional cost, so our monthly membership is currently $29, you get your self-paced labs, you get your videos, you get your practice exams, you get access to all of the training material, all of AWS, Linux, OpenStack, DevOps, and you have the ability to ask a question to instructor. So you can use the community to do that, but let's say you want to ask a one-on-one question because you're just not sure, you don't want to open it up to the community. I can go to Help and Questions and ask a question. And see, we have private question to an instructor. What this is going to do is it's going to open up a private question to the instructor, and you're going to be able to have a one-on-one conversation. So we like to provide mentoring help to our students as part of the Linux Academy.
Fantastic. So I think we've covered a lot in this podcast episode. I've certainly learned a lot. Now, if you have any questions, this is going to be posted on YouTube as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments. Again, if you're already a member, you can also ask questions in the community as well. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Anthony, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, Christophe, thanks for asking. I do have one more thing that I really do want to touch on that I think is very important. So we get a lot of questions. AWS makes a lot of changes. They're really, really good about innovating. They provide a lot of advanced features, and sometimes they change the way things are done. And sometimes the question is why do you still have content on something that really applied maybe 3 or 4 months ago, but AWS has since made a change? Maybe they released a little feature that kind of makes it deprecated, where you don't use it as much. And what I would encourage you is, just because if you launch it in the US standard region and it's changed and it's the new hotness, that doesn't mean you don't need to be prepared for it. And here's why. If you take a look at the public AWS certification blueprint, what it says is you need to have 1 year or more experience working inside of an AWS environment. Based off of that criteria, anything that has been out 1 year prior to your exam date that you might have seen inside of a corporate environment or inside of AWS could still show up on the exam, because they said that knowledge on there. It's required to have 1 year experience. If you've been working in it for 1 year, of course, some of the things you've seen, you're going to easily remember because you've had experience with that. The other thing I want you to be aware of is, let's say that you've been working in the US standard region. Just because the feature is no longer there or they've changed how it's done doesn't mean it applies to every single region. So there are still regions out there that don't support some AWS services. The way AWS works is they roll it out to specific regions at a time, not always every single region. So just because it's in the US standard doesn't mean it's in Europe, doesn't mean it's in Sydney. What is it, South Korea now, Singapore, so on and so forth. So that's something you also need to be aware of. Once it's a standard, it will be in all regions. Just because it might be in the region you're working in doesn't mean it's in the region that somebody over in Europe is working in or available with. So absolutely, when you're preparing for the exam, think of it from that perspective. What has been out there? Is it really outdated, or is it just changed in my region when it still could be that way in another region? So absolutely, don't try taking any shortcuts and studying only the new hotness. And I want you to be successful, so good luck, and please share your successes. Let us know if we've helped you in any way possible. We love celebrating student successes.
Thanks everyone for tuning in, and Anthony, thank you very much.
Thank you, Christophe.
Bye-bye.